Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. The Ange Postecoglou nightmare is over, but is that the end of the troubled times for Nottingham Forest? Postecoglou sacked 20 minutes after the 3-0 defeat at Chelsea today. So who's next? Is it Sean Dyche? Is it Roberto Mancini, whose name has just been mentioned in the media? Who is to blame for all this? And what comes next in terms of the rest of the season? Joining me to discuss it all, first of all, is Adam Summerton. Adam, the bat signal went up, or whatever the equivalent word should be. But here you are. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you? Are you coping? I mean, like I said to you in a text, there's never a dull moment for you, is there?
I think I'm coping. I was just walking back from the ground and got a message. Oh, it's me, Paul. He's sacked. I thought, what? Okay. Interesting times that we'll get into. Aforementioned Paul Morley, how are you?
I'm all right, I think. Overriding feeling is probably one of relief that this sort of torrid episode, chapter, call it what you will, is over. And possibly a little bit of hope and expectation that what's around the corner could be better. Maybe that's foolish optimism, I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm all right. I'm going out for a swanky meal after this for my wedding anniversary, so that'll help take the mind off the situation nicely.
Oh, well, congratulations to you. Well done to Mrs. Morley for putting up with you for so long. How many years?
14 years. So yeah, special treat for I'm taking her up the Shard tonight.
I'm going to move quickly on.
Yeah, nice building.
Dan, how are you? Dan Cook.
I wondered if Paul had his shirt on because he'd already been for the interview for the vacant job. I wondered if that's what was happening. I'm all right. I was at the game and obviously disappointed. I left the game with my brother, sort of talking about whether it was bad enough that Ange would be out of his job before Porto, and then driving home listening to BBC Radio Nottingham on delay. I think I was about 20 minutes behind everyone else getting the sort of breaking news that he'd gone. So kind of surprised by that, but at the same time, it felt as a game a little bit like it was possibly inevitable, I think.
Yeah, we'll get into whether it was a sackable offence. I didn't think it was, actually, but we might talk a bit about that more. Adam, kick us off from a slightly neutral point of view then. What do you make of Ange going today? How do you feel? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I can't say that I'm particularly surprised. I don't think many people would be surprised, maybe slightly surprised at just quite how brutal it was, literally minutes after the final whistle had gone. But I suppose once we saw that the owner's seat was unoccupied about an hour into the game, I guess then the writing was maybe on the wall. Is 8-9 games? I mean, you could look at it and say that's no time at all to judge a manager. However, I always think Postecoglou wasn't only judged upon his record at Nottingham Forest, he was also judged on what had happened at Tottenham. And I know that he won the Europa League in his final game there, but in terms of the Premier League form, obviously it was really poor in his second season at Tottenham. And I felt that there was, for him personally, there was a carryover from that. I didn't feel that at any point he really connected with the Forest public, the Nottingham public. I felt that was a real misstep from him right from the beginning. I felt another misstep from him was after the very first game, which albeit was a tough assignment away at Arsenal. He said something along the lines of, "You'll see my football in the very next game against Swansea." And I felt he was trying to do too much too soon, trying to change too much too quickly. So there was the PR side of it, which I didn't think was handled particularly well. His records that has sort of hung over him from what happened at Tottenham. And you could say that in some ways it was kind of, I don't know if doomed to failure from the very beginning is going too far, but I think it was always going to be very difficult for him to make it work. But I don't think at times he's helped himself in the examples that I've given there. And with this season in the Premier League, there isn't perhaps, as we've had in recent years, where there's at least two stick-on sides where you'd say they're probably going to go down. I think it's going to be a bit more competitive than that this season. So that's maybe led to more urgency from the owner as well, as they start to get more and more concerned. But as well, I think you just have to look at the performances on the pitch. I watched the game today while I was doing my prep for some games I've got coming up, and I just felt that Chelsea were, by their standards, were really poor in the first half, quite pedestrian, and the chances that Forest had, whilst they did have enough to be at least two up by half time, I felt that they were from Chelsea errors largely rather than things that they created themselves. And I just felt that at half time, once Maresca got hold of them, Chelsea looked a different team in the second half. Forest looked woeful on set pieces, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, can you cling on to anything where you can say, well, that's getting better, this is improving, there's green shoots there. And I just couldn't really see it. And when you put that together with the fact that the fans a lot of them didn't seem on board, it was going to be very, very difficult for him to turn it around.
Yeah, I don't know if it was doomed from the start. I think the issue was there's many issues. There was a narrow path to success, and it felt like it had to start pretty quickly and kick on from there. And it really cascaded into, I guess, inevitability. Paul, I mean, I assume you think. Well, I know you think this is the right decision. So just expand on that.
Yeah, it's felt inevitable for I think for me personally, probably from the Michelin game. I think. I mean, like you said, why we didn't take action 2 weeks ago and give whoever is in next some time with the guys to bed in before this game. I mean, whoever's coming in, whenever they come in, you'd imagine it's probably going to be in the next 24, 48 hours. They're going to have 2-3 days ahead of Porto and then straight into Bournemouth, and then we've got a week before Man U. So, yeah, it all just seems like there's been a lot of confused thinking at the club in the last couple of months. And, you know, this is kind of where it's led to. And I think, as you say, there was an air of inevitability about it. I can't think of one Forest fan that I spoke to or saw or who commented when Nuno left that Ange would have been their first choice. So, you know, there's obviously a reason why he went for Ange. And I think, obviously, the UEFA Cup, UEFA Europa League pedigree obviously is part of that. I do think, I've said before, I think part of it was he saw in Ange someone who could guarantee more eyes on the club, which is obviously what his, you know, grand sort of plan is to build Forest into this bigger brand and more global brand. And I think he saw Ange as a vehicle to do that. Obviously, the flip side of the coin is when things don't go well, then, you know, those eyes become trained on the club in not a positive way. And that's kind of all led to this sort of, you know, maelstrom of clamour for Ange to almost clamour for him to fail, not just from certain sections of Forest fans, but it also feels like, you know, parts of the media have just been sort of waiting. The knives are out. He's got this target on his back, as I've said before, and I don't think he can. We saw the way he was in the press conference yesterday. As forever long he continues behaving like that, whether he's at Forest or somewhere else, that target's just going to get bigger. And I think we as a club have got caught up in that sort of negativity around Ange, and this is where it's led us to. And like I say, I'm personally quite relieved it's all over.
Dan has flagged kindly in the chat, and I see a few people in the comments now as well. David Ornstein saying that Forest have been in contact with Mancini as an option. We'll get into the timing of it, but normally we have a manager lined up, so clearly we don't. But Mancini's interesting, and we'll definitely get into that. Well, I remember I was contacted about the Dyche story to say, I wasn't contacted by Forest, but to say it wasn't a leak by Forest and it wasn't kite flying. There's a question of where it did come from, but clearly Dyche wasn't quite as lined up, although he might well get the job, and we'll speak about that as well. Certainly interesting developments that we'll get into. In general, Dan, I saw your tweet yesterday. You wanted Ange gone as well. Your thoughts on his departure?
Like you sort of touched on, today's game wasn't really. It wasn't that bad that if you were basing it on this game, that you would be in that position. But it also felt like there was something off. You know, something's off with the players. I think the signs of missing chances and all that side of the game. I think that's just a worry that's a relegation team that you're looking at. You know, regardless of the bits up to those important moments, it just felt like that today. I guess with him as a whole in his period, I don't think it was inevitable that it wouldn't work at all, or certainly not inevitable it'd be this bad. You know, to get no wins at all out of his opening games, it just felt like such a bad fit for where we were. I suppose that was the problem, and then he hasn't done anything along the way to ease those concerns by the way he's gone about things. And I think we did have quite a chaotic summer in the end, you know, since that moment where the Gibbs-White contract stuff came out. And since then on, it was a bit chaotic. And then I just feel like Ange is not the kind of manager that's going to come in and kind of be able to calm that and isolate that from the players. I think he sort of adds to that with everything he brings. And I sort of think you can see that in the performances at the minute. I think you can see the players aren't quite focused on the game. It just feels like they're slightly off. Although the effort's there, it's not about effort and wanting to go well. It's about that ability, I think, to just go out on the pitch and be like laser focused on what's needed to get through that game, and then worry about what else is to come. And it just feels like there's too much going on, and today just felt like, although the performance was okay, everything going on, ticket sales down, missing chances, all that stuff, it just feels like, how do we refresh this? How do we get a refresh? And unfortunately, it's the manager that ends up taking that, that whatever chop on the block, I suppose.
Thank you to Red Dog Cooks for membership. Appreciate that. Sad day. I think it was doomed from the start, which we have discussed a little bit. I know, Adam, you said, and you probably will stick to this, we've got a good squad. There's no way it should be in this kind of, be in this kind of trouble. Did it feel like, though, if Ange had stayed, it could cascade? Because everything was going wrong for Ange and around him. But it was that the worry that this would have really gone to hell if he'd left him too much longer.
Well, as I say, I mean, you're always looking for things to cling on to, that things are getting better, that messages are getting across, that players are buying into things, that supporters are buying into things. And when I was looking at it from a neutral perspective, other than that 30 minutes away in the Europa League, there was very little to cling on to in terms of it getting better. Now, I know it's still ridiculously early days, but I think all the points I've heard there, in terms of why it hasn't worked and why it wasn't going to work going on, it all feeds into it. The PR side of things, the rather chaotic summer. Was he the right person in terms of the stylistic? I actually understood, and I know I've said this before, I understood why Forest wanted to evolve the style. I fully got that. I also understood why they might want to move away from Nuno, and why Nuno might have actually wanted to move away himself. We'll never get to the bottom of why that part of the ways truly happened, but I understood why it made sense for both parties. However, for that part of the ways to happen successfully from the club's perspective, the change needed to happen in the summer, not 3 or 4 games into the season. And that's where this is all unraveled. It's because of the timing. And to give you another example of what I mean by that, is that if you were to say to me, who should Forest be looking to appoint, who I would suggest as potential names to come in, would be one thing if this were pre-season. It's quite another now. I think now you're in a stage where you're looking, well, what are the qualities that are required to start getting results on the board pretty quickly for Forest? And you're looking for somebody who can organise, somebody who can make players feel good about themselves, a man manager, not necessarily somebody who stylistically will end up taking the club to where Marinakis wants it to be. So that's the difficulty that he's got, and it's almost impossible, really, to find the sweet spot that for somebody who caters for the short term, the medium, and the long term, where Forest find themselves right now. So it's a very, very difficult appointment. I don't think that it was going to work under Postecoglou. I mean, it further made my mind up today. I think, to be honest, it looked as though a lot of people at the club's mind must have been made up before, even today, when you consider how quickly the trigger was pulled after the game. Look, Mancini's just flashed up on my phone as well as I've been talking to you. If I'm to look at what I think Forest need right now, it is that unifying type figure, that organiser, perhaps most of all that man manager. I think Mancini's got a lot of qualities. I'm not quite so sure that he would be the right fit for what Forest need right now. And he hasn't had a club job since Zenit, which was back in, I think, 2017-18, around then. So he's been out of the club game for quite a while, obviously managed Italy and Saudi Arabia since then. And he's also somebody as well who to pick up on something Dan said there, it feels like it just needs somebody to go, let's all calm down, lads. That's what it feels like right now for Forest, both for the fan base and for the clubs. And whilst Mancini might be able to do that, he's also quite a volatile character. We saw that during his playing career. We've seen it during his managerial career as well. Yes, he's won lots of things. He's been very successful in both, but he can be quite a volatile character as well. And I wonder whether, again, that might be something that, would you want to take a risk in that respect in the current circumstances?
What are his qualities in his
favour? I think that he's somebody who throughout his career, well, first and foremost, I mean, if you're looking at somebody who would walk into a dressing room and should command respect for what he did as a player, it would be Mancini. I mean, he was an exceptional player. I mean, I'm a big fan of old style retro Samp, and he was certainly a big part of that. So that's the first thing he brings. He's had success in the Premier League, obviously with Manchester City. He's had success in Italy as well. I think he's somebody who can organise. That would be certainly something that he would be able to bring. So he would be able to come in, and I think he would be able to organise the players pretty quickly. I don't necessarily Whether he would fit in terms of the style of play, it's very difficult to say because you don't really know where Forest are in terms of that. Where is the owner in terms of that? Is he happy now for them to row back to where they were last season stylistically and almost reboot from last season and go back to a team that doesn't necessarily have lots of the ball, will look to hit on the counter-attack, things like that, be strong again on set pieces? Or does he want to still put his foot down in terms of evolving the style to have more of the ball, be more aggressive? I don't really know because I don't know what the owner wants. And that's what he wants is what goes. So it's very difficult to sit here and say this is the guy that will suit them, other than to say they need an organizer, they need someone who'll manage well. But stylistically, I don't know. I don't know whether you three can offer more on that, but I think it's so hard when it all comes down to one person's opinion, basically.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly get into... We'll talk about Marinakis and the timing of all this next. There's 1,400 people with us, which means things are probably pretty catastrophic. So good to have everyone on board. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. There was 1,000 people with us inside 5 minutes, which probably says something. Let's take a word for the Trent navigation just quickly. The new chapter to start, now, and Sturm Graz is on the horizon. You can enjoy that game at the NAB, and you can get a free pint of Madrid if you arrive before 5:30 p.m. to not drown your sorrows, because we're all looking optimistically now. Hopefully get your dinner there, watch it on the outdoor screens. If you're not going to Graz, I assume not many people are because it's a hot ticket. So yeah, thanks to the NAV for their support, and let's talk about the timing. Surely, Paul, if you, as Adam said, if you've made your mind up, and as we've said, we didn't play that bad today, should we not have done this 2 weeks ago?
Yes, as long as whoever is coming next is available. I think that's obviously a question mark that we don't know yet. We don't know the answer to that. Obviously, people saying in the chat that the Mancini sort of rumours are gathering pace. I don't know whether that's just because it's come from Ornstein or whether there's other stuff out there since we started that's talking about that. I think obviously the ideal point of doing this, if we were going to get cut the cord with Ange, would have been at the start of the international break, as I said before. But look, we're not in that space. We are where we are, and I think to Adam's point, that means that I think personally that we just need to get someone in, as you say, just to say, look, take a step back, lads. Let's just calm things down a little bit. You need somebody that knows the league, that knows what they're doing. I think Mancini, for a number of reasons, would be quite a risk, not least a financial one, because you'd imagine that he is going to want a fair wedge if he's going to come and take this club forward. If he just come out of Saudi, I know Nuno had as well, but I guess you look at Mancini's track record, and I think as Ali Martin says, the suits that he wears don't come cheap. So he's going to want a healthy wage, and if that doesn't work, that's going to be a chunky payoff, another one. It feels like to me all roads kind of pointing towards Dyche for now, and I think as Adam says, that may well mean that there's a bit of humble pie eaten in the boardroom about this whole evolution of style, which I think, again, I agree with Adam, is the right thing to do, and understand why they wanted to do that. But I think I said this before, we've all got a lot to thank Marinakis for in the last few years for what he's done for the football club and the ambition that he's shown to keep us pushing forward. But there's a very fine line between ambition and greed. And I mean by that, wanting and striving and demanding maybe too much too soon. And I think we all got a little bit giddy, obviously him included, what we achieved last season, which was, let's be honest, was way, way ahead of schedule. And that's just sort of led to this, seemingly series of pretty chaotic and ill-judged decisions. A, to appoint Postecoglou in the first place, B, to stick with him through this international break and then fire him 20 minutes after the final whistle. Like I said at the beginning, just a lot of confused thinking, and it just needs someone, I think, just to come in, as we said, calm it down, say, look, lads, I've got this. As you say, build the players up. Take responsibility for getting Forest out of this situation. And for me, I think Sean Dyche is probably the right man for that.
He might be disappointed. Fabrizio Romano reports Forest have made a formal approach to Roberto Mancini. Postecoglou got sacked. It does say Dyche is on the short list. We'll come back to the timing. What do you make of Dyche versus Mancini, Dan?
can't say I would know that much about Mancini's style of football to compare. I feel like, well, first off, he played 4 games for Leicester, didn't he? So that's already a black mark on his record. We might have to worry about that. But I think he's probably a fairly defence-first manager from what I remember of kind of his Italy team and that. You know, they worked hard, they were solid. Obviously, you know, they've got quality and he will know that side of the game as much as anything. So I would expect that he will be fairly pragmatic in his style of play. I think, like Adam touched on, his character and everything could be a little bit fiery, but I suppose if you're coming into this situation, maybe that kind of gravitas that he brings going into the changing room will help, you know, unify the players and things like that from this point of view. So, yeah, it's a bit out of the blue, isn't it? I guess talking about the timing of the decision, the alternatives, I think 2 weeks ago probably just weren't attractive enough to want to make the decision. I guess, like you know, they've touched on already. It's a case of there wasn't enough desire to go that way in order to make the decision. So perhaps Mancini's come out of the blue a little bit now, and it's a bit more interesting over the last few days to the club. A bit more of a big name that'll you know, feel like a good appointment. But it's also interesting because I always thought if we did go for Dyche, it would just be to the end of the season, regardless of whether Dyche realised that or wanted that. It just felt like we'd end up in that position where there would be another manager available in the summer, and that change would be made sort of almost regardless how he performed as manager. Whereas with Mancini, I don't know, you know, presumably that's a bit more of a longer term plan to think that he might do well this season and then carry on into next season. So they are different options, I guess, in that respect, as well as character and style of play. You know, I can't imagine Mancini just wants to come here and do a firefighting job in a kind of Big Sam style. So there's got to be a longer term plan, but it's also coming about very quickly. So I'm sure Postecoglou was a long term plan until he didn't win a game in his first 8.
I'll throw that one at Adam in 1 second because he might be have some insight on it. A good point here. David Platt has worked extensively with Mancini. Talking PR disasters, if David Platt's in the dugout alongside him for his first game, then I think Mancini might be on hiding to nothing as well. Mancini and his track record, has he stuck around? I know obviously he's had great success at like Italy, Man City. He was there for a while. Does he stick at clubs, Adam, into your knowledge?
But can I just say about David Platt? I'll always remember being a student, and we used to be able to take our equipment, and Forest were really great with us. I'm going back a long time here to when I was a student in Nottingham, but they used to invite us in to go and do filming, and we went in when he was the manager there, Platt, and we were ushered into his office to do an interview, and on his desk was all these Italian coaching manuals. I always remember that. But as a kid who grew up during Italia 90, I always remember all I could hear in my head as I looked at him was Ness and Dormer. That was always my abiding memory of David Platt, but it was very good to us. In terms of Mancini, I think something that he will bring, or would bring, would be a degree of pragmatism, which I think is something that I remember saying when Postecoglou came in, because of the timing of when he came in, early days into the season, who he was replacing. And that was why the alarm bells particularly rang for me after that press conference after the Arsenal game, where he talked about his brand of football coming in immediately. I just felt that it needed somebody with that sort of versatility, flexibility, pragmatism, all of those things. And I think whilst, yes, there are principles to the way Mancini will want to play, I do believe that he would have, to a certain extent, that ability to play in a way that would suit the players that they have there now. And I think that's what this really needs as well, is that Forest, we have to remember this, and we have to underline this and underscore this. This is a very talented group of players. Now, I think it's top heavy at the minute, the squad, and that creates its own problem. And that's why I talk about the need for a man manager, because you've got certain individuals at that club who've been signed for a lot of money who have barely kicked a ball. And that's not going to help in terms of the harmony behind the scenes. And I think that's something that needs managing as well. So I think those man management skills would really need to come to the fore. But there is that versatility, that pragmatism that I think they can bring. And also, as Dan said, he will bring that defensive organisation as well that they would need. And I'm particularly alarmed at looking at Forest at the minute at set pieces. I mean, wow. What a change from last season. I mean, that's got to stop. That's got to be sorted out quickly. And Mancini is somebody who could sort that out. I would just, I mean, look, I'll give you some positive, some negatives. Obviously, he hasn't had a club job for a very long time. that would be a concern for me. I go back as well to that volatility that he has. I mean, because it's something that, you know, it was something that was very prevalent in his playing career. I can remember fallouts when he was an Italy player, things that he's talked about with regret in books and articles over the years. I don't know. I need to really digest this Mancini thing, to be honest, because it's really come out of the blue. But if you're looking for what they need right now, I think the qualities that, if you're looking at it, they need that versatility, pragmatism, good man management, somebody to calm the whole situation down, maybe somebody who could unify. And it is difficult to find that sweet spot. But as Dan says, and this is the key thing, and this is why he's probably looking at a name like Mancini, is they might be thinking, no, we're not just going to settle for somebody to come in for between now and the end of the season to be a firefighter. We want to continue to put our foot down. We can still have a good season. And they might be right in that. Look, it's still very early. It is still very early in the season. So I can understand that thought process. However, it is a huge gamble when you consider the competitiveness of the Premier League at the bottom end this season. They've got to get this one right. They cannot afford to be looking at a fourth manager of a season if you're potentially in a relegation battle. And they've got to get this right.
Yeah, it's a bad year to be bad, and hearing huge gamble isn't really what I want to hear, to be honest. Is there a plan, Paul? Is there evidence of a plan when we're sacking a manager and TNT are reporting that Morgan's doing his interview saying we're all behind the manager as the manager's literally being sacked and walking out with his backpack on and everyone's been called to the boardroom? It doesn't scream to me that there's much of a plan here. Am I reading too much into it or not?
Just again, it's more evidence of the sort of confusion, and where we had cohesion before, we've now got confusion. Go back 12 months ago, everything seemed to be, everyone was on the same page, players, manager, owner, fans, and everyone's just now seemingly in a different space and going in a different direction. We can just see on the chat, the split between the reaction to the Mancini and the Dyche conversation that suggests that fans are split. Players obviously backing the manager who's being sacked. That's never a good look, is it?
Murillo did like the tweet saying he'd been sacked.
Murillo, and I think the fact he took Murillo off today, I think he was quite angry with Murillo, wasn't he, about the Michelin thing and the injury and him staying on the field. I don't know. Again, don't want to hark back to that and whose fault that was, but clearly that there was maybe something in that relationship that wasn't quite right. So, does it look like we've got a plan? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But currently, the plans seem to be very much up in the air, and there's nothing concrete that suggests that there's a clear way forward. But let's not give up hope. I think as we said, look, there's only 8 games gone in the season. Still 30 games to go. Huge amount of football to be played. An opportunity will come over the next few weeks to get results and get ourselves out of the mess that we're in. But as Adam says, we've got to get this next appointment right. And given what happened in the last couple of months, you do fear that we chase. Mancini feels like we'd be chasing a big name for the sake of it, to kind of keep Marinakis's kudos at a certain level, and he's almost kind of resisting Dyche more from a personal sort of perception thing in terms of how people perceive him if he goes down that road. So that's a dangerous situation to a degree, I think, where the ego takes over and that clouds the decision making. So let's wait and see.
I'll put this up. I wasn't saying players got involved in the sacking. I'm saying how we've handled it today. I mean, I feel a bit sorry for Ange, to be honest. I mean, I don't think he's entirely to blame for all this. We knew what we were getting, and this was always a distinct possibility, and it's been a terrible appointment. Do you have any issues with how we handled this today, Dan, as a football club, or you're not asked about it?
You mean in terms of, obviously,
20 minutes after a game, I think Ryan Yates got wheeled out for the post-match press conference. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't, doesn't scream stability and plan to me. It screams owners in a fucking rage, and he's gone downstairs after 60 minutes and said, that's it, he's got to go. That isn't really great for me in terms of long-term planning. But if that's the case, so do you have any problems with today or not?
I guess we're kind of becoming a bit used to it, aren't we? It feels sometimes like it's a bit of a circus, and we talk about other clubs like we're going to follow the Brighton way and all that, and then we do stuff like this, which couldn't be further from that. This is more like the Leicester way or something. Or, this is not a clear plan and a strategy, certainly. I don't really understand the Ange appointment if it was part of a strategy to change the style of football, because as Adam said, you do that in the summer, you make your decision then, you don't offer Nuno a new contract. So, whatever decision we look at this summer, it's hard to see it as part of a bigger plan, because you offer a new contract to the existing manager, then you don't give him the players he really wants, and you bring in other players late on, and then that manager goes, and then another manager comes in with a completely different style of play. And then obviously you don't really give him a great deal of time, albeit the results decide his fate. So we could have done it another way, couldn't we, today? We definitely could. We could have waited till tomorrow morning to make the announcement, and then Mancini or whoever comes in quickly afterwards. It didn't need to be done in that way. I don't know whether that's to try and appease the fans almost, because I think everyone feels like they needed a reaction perhaps, but today actually the crowd wasn't in the same space as the Midtjylland game. I didn't think it wasn't as much of that anger at what was happening. It was just kind of a bit resigned to like, it's kind of happened again. We've missed chances again, and it didn't feel like there was that immediate need to sort of satisfy any kind of reaction from the fans. So it was a bit of a surprise, like I say, driving home to kind of see that it had been announced so quickly and done that way. Obviously, there was the bit on TNT as well about the fact that the players were all called up to the boardroom and having a big meeting about it and all that. And you sort of wonder, well, what's happening in there? Is it a case of canvassing the players for opinion, or is it giving them a telling off and saying, right, if you keep playing like this, I'm going to get Sean Dyche in and he's going to make you do set piece training all day or something. I don't know. He's kind of like, what is going on? As a plan, hard to see. I think if you'd have told me Sean Dyche was coming in, I would say, right, look, we are having a plan to the end of the season. I think if you bring in Mancini in, the more I think about it, the more exciting I can get by that prospect, because I don't think you are then just looking at firefighting. And it's never felt like at this stage you're quite at that point yet. It feels like we can go a little bit longer before you really start worrying about being in a relegation battle. But if Mancini or someone of that capability potentially is available, then that makes me feel a little bit better, even if it's, again, come about through not necessarily a plan, but a bit of kind of, last minute agent talk or something like that, I guess.
Can I just talk on the Mancini versus Dyche thing? I've just been going through it in my head. And I think what the club needs, we need someone to come in and galvanise everybody. We need someone to galvanise the players. We need someone to galvanise the fans. And I think what always struck me about the whole Ange appointment was it felt like he was coming in feeling like he was doing us a favour. Like I'm Ange Postecoglou. It's about me. I'm going to Nottingham Forest. I'm going to win them a trophy. I'm doing them a favour. And it feels like, I'm not quite sure. I don't think Roberto Mancini's kind of woke up in the middle of the night ever in his life dreaming of being the Forest manager. Sean Dyche, I think we know, does really, really want this job and's craved it for a long time. So I think we're just in a space where, and even if it is short term, I get the whole point about long term, short term planning. But I think we need someone who wants us, rather than somebody who's just kind of come in for a paycheck. And for Mancini, 60 years old, if it doesn't work out for him, there's no skin off his nose, is it? He's been there, done it. He's kind of got all the medals in his cabinet at home. So if he comes in and fails, then he's off into the sunset with another payment, and it's probably no skin off his nose. He doesn't really care. I think we need someone that cares next. I think that's where I'm at. And again, I'll go back to it before. I think. Even if it is just for short term, Dyche is the right way to go.
Thanks today. 1,500 people watching. Do us a favour and hit like. I'll ask James Perch on Monday what the players make of it, but I'll ask you now, Adam, in terms of, okay, let's say Dyche comes in. It's a short term fix. We've got well over £100 million worth of talent that didn't even get on the bench today, that don't strike me as Dyche players. Then we've got players who probably are his kind of players, some of whom are in absolutely god-awful form. Morgan Gibbs-White today was terrible, and his body language was terrible by the end of the game. Will those players, who are our best players, want to stay here long-term if Dyche comes in? What does he do with Bakwa, Hutchinson, Callum Owendo, McAtee, who we spent a shit ton of money on and can't get in the squad, it feels like it might be short-term fix for long-term problems. I'm angling and saying none of this feels good to me, and we'll get on to the longer term. But what do you think about that?
Well, this is the great difficulty of the situation they find themselves in, whether you're looking for a guy who's going to take you on in terms of the style of play into the medium term rather than somebody for the short term. There's problems with how we're talking about Dyche, because I bet if you asked Dyche and said about the end of the season, he'd say, I'm not a manager till the end of the season. I'm a manager for the long term. So that's the first thing. Yeah. If it is till the end of the season and that's how it's packaged up and marketed to the Forest fans, then that presents its own problems for me. Because as you've just illustrated there's a real man management job to do with a lot of players who they've spent a lot of money on who are not getting a lot of minutes. So if a manager goes in and they know that he's only there until the end of the season, for me, that can present a whole load more problems, because players are going to be thinking, well, this guy's not here for long. And because players if you speak to players, and I've spoken to a lot over the years, they are pretty selfish. A lot of them, we all think that we, as football fans, we want to think that it's all committed to our particular club, and I'm sure a lot are. However, they will be thinking of their own futures as well, first and foremost, in a lot of cases, I would imagine. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's a job at the end of the day. But that's the difficulty with going for somebody who you think, well, he'll save us, he'll get everyone playing again. And the other thing with that as well is, look, stylistically, and again, I keep coming back to this style, and the reason I do is because I think it's important to the owner, and the owner's fundamental in all of this in terms of the future direction of the club. And I don't think that while Sean Dyche has played a brand of football that's had its success over the years, and I think he's clearly a very good coach who's got many merits, I'm not necessarily sure that the style of football is one that will be easy enough on the eye to please the fans in the medium and long term, and the owner as well. So that's a difficulty too, because somebody like Dyche could come in and the first 10 games, you might have 5 wins and a couple of draws, and everything steadies and everybody's like, right, we don't need to worry about relegation anymore. We can kick on. But then how long would it take for people to then start going, football's not great though, is it? Don't like the football. And that's a big problem for if you appoint somebody like that for necessarily the short term. So I'm not saying I'm against that or that it wouldn't be the right thing to do right now. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, if you like, and give the other side of it. And that is the big problem in appointing this. I tell you what, I wouldn't like to be the person in charge of appointing this next guy for Forest, the circumstances they find themselves in, because it is an unbelievably difficult appointment. The only thing I'll just say, last thing I will say on this, to give an example of a club who are in a very similar position. There are differences, but I've mentioned it on here before about Roma, and there are some real similarities to last season, where De Rossi lasted 3 games at the start of the season. He had been in the season before, but of that season he lasted 3 games. Juric, I think it was 12 games, something like that. Ranieri came in as a unifying figure in, I think it was early November. And his record was astonishing. And, they went on to have a pretty successful season. And I remember saying at the time before he came in, look, if somebody can just get hold of this and unify everyone, these are good players. And it's the same thing with Forest. It's a good squad. It's a talented squad. I don't think it would take a huge amount of organisation for them to get back on an even keel. I really don't. It's a squad that should be nowhere near relegation. So I do still think if somebody can get hold of it, but it might have to be for the short term. So that's why I'm trying to say it's so difficult to find the sweet spot of who is the right guy.
Just before you come in, Paul, because you wanted to come in, thanks to Owen for the €5, and sort of saying, give Dyche's talented squad, as we mentioned as well, could turn out quite well for us. You either took a very deep breath there, Paul, or you wanted to come in.
Well, no, I think people have said it in the comments, what was going through my head, in that I can't recall. I know we've talked about the rights and wrongs, or the understanding of why the owner why the hierarchy wanted to move towards a different style of play to progress the club. I don't think many fans were sort of asking for that. No one was asking for getting bored with Nuno's style. We were quite happy to be winning, and I know the back end of last season wasn't great results wise, but most of all, people care about winning, right, or getting performances and results, and seeing a team play with passion and with heart, even if that's at the compromise of a bit of style. I think, given that where we've been for the last 20 odd years, we would take somebody who comes in, gets us going, and just get, what you want. You talked about body language earlier on with Gibbs White. Absolutely no way that he would get away with behaving like that with someone like Dyche, because he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't stand for it. And so we need somebody to come in, get the players, a rocket up the backside, and also just get them confidence as well. You could see today that the confidence is so lacking, particularly in the final third of the pitch. I know we haven't really talked about the game at all, and there's obviously bigger things to discuss, but it's symptomatic of where everybody is what we're seeing at in the final third of the pitch. And even if Sean Dyche's record isn't going to be bringing us free flowing football and winning games 4-5-0, we didn't have that with Nuno, and we were quite happy with it. So, like I say, let's just take a step back and get somebody in who can get everybody pulling in the same direction. I think that's the key that we need. And I said before, I think there's only really one person I can see that's the right person to get everybody on the same page.
Next question will be for Dan about if he's got any anger towards anyone, and if so, who. But before we do that, why give him 25 seconds to think about it? Thanks very much, Nottingham Window Company. Appreciate the support and appreciate them backing our This is a post-match show, but we haven't talked about the game at all, so I hope it's the only time we ever do that. But they do sponsor our Saturday post-match shows. If you're looking for new windows or new doors in the Nottinghamshire area or around the East Midlands, do click on the link in the description and you can see what they do. But thank you very much to them as ever. I said I don't necessarily blame Ange, Dan. We knew what we were getting. Whose door is that?
Someone's got a visitor.
It's Paul's. Yeah, someone say happy anniversary. Any anger to anyone, and if so, who would you be pointing the finger at, or is that just pointless at the moment?
It must be. It's Sean Dyche around with a brown envelope, I think, for Paul's sales pitch.
Paul's packing him sales.
Is it anger? It's frustration. Yeah, there are. I think my frustration is the fact that we don't seem to follow the sort of the things that we get told by managers all the time about stability and consistency, and building a squad of the right players and the right type of squad, and not just doing the kind of, well, we've got this money, so let's go and spend it, and let's keep waiting and finding a better player in the same position rather than the right player to build the squad. And I think that's where my frustration comes in. I feel like every manager we have sort of talks about the same things about that, and obviously time being one of them, which Ange hasn't had, and the pre-season, which Ange hasn't had, which I think is what gives me the reason to say it's not really his fault. It never was his fault. He's had a very difficult job, but he's then not helped himself along the way. But it's the people behind that have kind of ignored what we see other clubs do. This is the trouble, is we're sort of comparing ourselves between trying to be this top six club and then also comparing other teams that are doing what we're doing a bit closer, which is your Brentfords and your Brightons and your Bournemouths, trying to steadily position yourself as a top half team. And they do that with stability and trying to bring in players at the right level that might take a year to get up to speed, or 2 years to get up to speed, but the player knows that, and they know that once the guy in front of them gets sold, they then come into the squad and they're the next guy. And it's sort of the same with the manager and the staff. You look at, say, Brentford bringing in an assistant to then become the manager, and they have this long-term plan. And I think what Paul touched on earlier about the issue with Dyche and, say, Mancini is the next move is that there still is that ego thing there of we want to act like a Man City, we want to act like a big six club, and Mancini does that. And I just don't think, regardless of contract terms and all that, I don't see Dyche being a manager that Marinakis would be happy to see us having as the manager of the club next season. Just from an image point of view and where we're aiming to be, he doesn't want us to be aiming to be Everton from last season or the season before, does he? He wants us to be aiming to be seen as a big six club, and that's where his view of it is, and that will steer his decision. I think that's why he thought Postecoglou was kind of that ilk, and Mancini will be of that ilk. But it's not, we talk about Brighton models and all that. This is the area where we don't do that. We might have had people in the backroom staff that do a bit of that, with the way they recruit players and find players. But we've also then got this other input, which is that we don't want to act like them. They're not what we're aiming for. We're aiming to go higher than that. So we're going to try and act like that. And it can, it obviously can backfire where we are now with players. Obviously, we've not really touched on the lineup today, have we? The shock of the lineup, seeing Taiwo starting up front and having 120 million pounds worth of players not even on the bench. Just how do we get to that position when you're a team that's just looking for any kind of result? You've got all that talent that's not even on the bench, and it's just coming back to the question of, is there a plan? I mean, I suppose that's probably the biggest indicator that there was no plan really this summer, because even the manager that you've brought in to try and use this squad isn't these guys that we've spent so much money on. So there is a lot of chaos, and you do have to look above the manager in terms of the big picture of how we've got to this position. And I just think Ange was not the guy to deal with that. Mancini might be able to deal with it, but he also might clash with the people behind the scenes, and it might kick off again. But hopefully, I suppose at least he knows what he's coming into, which again, I guess you could say Ange did. But
it goes back to what I said before, doesn't it? About craving too much too soon, and obviously these other teams are going about it steady. And I remember a podcast that we had before last season when we were kind of talking about where would we be comfortable with finishing after the season when we finished 17th. I think most people are like, if we could just gradually nudge up 2 places a season, finish 14th, finish 12th, finish 10th, and do it that way. But I know that the owner's not minded that way, and that's part of I guess what makes us love him so much is that the ambition. He wants this club to achieve bigger things and better things. But there's sometimes nothing like a tried and trusted path, and trying to skip 3 steps of the process in one has kind of led us to where we are, I think. And I think, as I said, maybe it's just time to take a step back, take stock, if that is for the next 12 months or so, and then go again. Because if we keep chasing this sort of golden ball at the end of the rainbow, we could fall off the road pretty quickly if the next appointment is another Ange style, chasing a big name, chasing the bright lights, and it goes wrong. And then we're back in the Championship and in a whole heap of what.
I think as well, it's fine sometimes to say, we've got this wrong, fellas. We've got this wrong, and we just need to gather ourselves again. We need to accept that we've made a mistake. We went in the wrong direction. Maybe we tried to run before we could walk. All of these different things. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that necessarily loses any face at all, because what they're trying to do, fellas, and again, I think, as I always say when I come on here, really important to acknowledge how good Forest squad is. Also really important to acknowledge how supercharged the club's development has been as well. And I think that really is a huge part of this situation that you find yourselves in, is because it was supercharged. It's years ahead of schedule. So to get that, and then not only get to that point that you did last season, but then continue that trajectory without any bumps in the road, I think that was always likely to be extremely unlikely, with Postecoglou there or not. I mean, that's turned out to be not the right appointment, but I think bumps in the road were always going to happen. It's how you then deal with those bumps in the road. It's how you react to that adversity. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong in just saying, look, we've made a bit of a mistake here. Maybe we've tried to go a little bit too fast in our development. Let's just rein things in a little bit and not go back to basics, but just try and get everything on an even keel. And that's why, and again, I'm giving all sides here, because I know I've said that a short-term appointment might not be the best thing for the reasons that I gave earlier. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we've got to just try and arrest this somehow, and that might mean just acknowledging that pushing forward to try and be a team that's finishing in the European places every season going forward might be trying to do that a little bit too soon.
100%.
Yeah. I've bored people to death by talking about running before we can walk and talking way too much about winning trophies and all that stuff. But yeah, I think Marinakis got this wrong, certainly. People are pointing the finger at Edu, but I'm sure this was a Marinakis appointment and it's been a disaster. So the next appointment is key. So just to wrap things up, final 10 minutes. How do you see things going from here, Paul? How worried are you, or how hopeful are you that things will turn? Well, the Mick McCarthy thing is, it can't get any worse, can it? And then it can.
Yeah.
Is that coming, or is it going to get better?
Do you know what? No, I said at the start, I think I don't think it can be much worse, can it, than what we've had in the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. It feels like we're at the bottom of a trough. I hope we are. So I'm still, I still think, given a whys and wherefores about why I think it should be Sean Dyche, but whoever comes in next, we talk about manager bounce, right? And I think that's one thing. And going back to Ange, is he never really had the opportunity to get that, because normally managers come in when teams are struggling and they've lost a load of games in a row, and it's very easy to get that manager bounce because you need one win. If someone's not had a win in 8 like Ange has, even if whoever comes in next doesn't win the first game but wins the second or third game, that's better than what they've come from. Whereas Ange didn't come into a situation where we were a team that was, on its knees. So whoever comes in should give us optimism, give us belief that they can make a difference. So for that reason, I am, I'm erring on the side of positivity about what comes next. Unless it's possibly Rafa Benitez, but then someone might have to talk back on. But thankfully, I don't think there's been much noise about that. I know there was a few weeks ago, but yeah, look, let's see. I'm still, like Adam says, we've got a good squad, we've got a good team. As I said, it's only 8 games gone in the league season, only 2 games gone in Europe. We've still got another 6 there, so there's still loads of time for the club to go on and have a decent season. I don't want to say a successful season, but a season where there are some successes. And for right now, success feels like finishing 13th, 14th, something like that, and just having a quiet season. I think we would all, I'm sure 99% of people in the chat, if you offered us 13th place now, we'd all take that and stamp your hand off. So I still think we've got plenty of time and plenty of ability and the right squad and a good enough squad to recover. We just got to get this next appointment right.
Yeah, if you're in the chat and you wouldn't take 13th to even 13th to 17th, let us know why. Let's talk about it before I go to Dan. Fixtures coming up: Bournemouth away, who look pretty decent. Man United at home, Leeds at home, international break. Liverpool away, Bournemouth, Brighton at home, Wolves away, Everton away, and then some European games as well. Obviously, but I've said repeatedly on here, Europe is a bit of a sideshow to me now. How are you feeling, Dan, when you hear those fixtures and hear what Paul says?
There's a couple of bogey teams in there. I think, I just think we need like a 0-0 draw. I think I said this before. Like, we just need something to build on, don't we? That's what we need. We don't need a perfect performance. It just feels like everyone needs something that we can just build on. That includes the players and the fans. Almost a game that we don't have much to talk about. 0-0, right? And then the next game we get on from there. I still, if you're looking for hope and positivity, I still look back to that Brentford game at the start of the season. I mean, we were brilliant in that game. We absolutely took them to pieces in that first half. And there's no way at all we thought we'd be in this position, having seen that first half of football. So, yes, we know that the players can do it. We know the squad can do it. We know we can actually go out and really, put, say, bottom half teams to bed in games if we can get that reset that we need to get the players back to whatever confidence they had then and whatever clarity about their job and their roles that they had in that game, then we can still turn this around. I mean, in terms of where we're aiming for, one of the stat spreadsheets I do is kind of like, well, how many teams with the number of points we've got after so many games have finished in the different, kind of league positions? So like, where are we realistically aiming for? And look, top half, a team that's got our points tally after 8 games or wherever we are in the league now, you struggle to get in the top half. So anyone who's suggesting that we are now aiming for top half in the league is really pushing it, that we'd have to be a one-off kind of season to do that and turn it around now, which, again, being Forest, we saw Steve Cooper do that in the Championship, so you never know. But I think we are just aiming for avoiding the fear and the risk of a relegation battle, and still, presumably aiming to try and really compete in the Europa League, because we should still be one of the sort of favourites for that if again our squad is performing and our team is performing at that level. So whoever comes in, it's just finding a way to reset it, and that's why it felt like Ange just couldn't go on. Someone has to find a way of kind of finding a level of reset that we can build on, and like we say, quiet the noise, and we get to see the best. Just find a way to get the best of these players, because we know that they're a level above what we're seeing right now.
Adam, neutral point of view, as mentioned, and someone who's touted our squad. So how do you see this playing out? What are your hopes or fears for us?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if the new coach is in place for the Porto game, because that is going to be a tough game. They've had a really good start to the season, Porto. I think they will certainly challenge for the Portuguese title this season. Their last game they drew 0-0 with Benfica, but I think they'd won every game aside from that. It's funny because their new coach who they got from Ajax is Farioli, who would be one of many young coaches who I could name right now who I would be looking at if I were Forest in different circumstances. If this were June or something like that, that there would be many different names you'd be looking at. So I think the Porto game will be a tough one for it if that is the first one in charge. It could also, if it goes the other way, and it goes really well, what a great start that could be, a full City ground, a new coach, a win under the belt. So I think as well, just to cover something else that we've mentioned here with Mancini is, I don't think Mancini's got too much experience in terms of a club side of this type of situation. If you look at his history in terms of the clubs that he's managed, Man City, Inter, where he won several Scudetti, he won several Coppa Italias, Galatasaray, where he won the Turkish Cup there. So he's not really had much experience of, look, I don't know whether Forest fans would say they're in a relegation battle or not, but he hasn't got experience of them if they are. So that's another reason why, that could be a risky appointment. Somebody on the chat said if they were choosing between Spalletti or Mancini, they would go with Spalletti, and I agree. I love Spalletti, but that would still be a pretty left field appointment. If I may just throw another name in, because I've banged on quite a bit on here about a unifying figure. I just wonder whether the name Nigel Clough is worth just putting into the mix. I know that people would look at that and maybe say, well, his experience of managing at the very top level, but it is somebody who I hear a lot because I live in Mansfield and I listen to the local radio station a lot. I hear him talk, and obviously when he was at Derby as well. I don't know. That could just be something worth considering. Somebody who's got vast experience and can certainly organise a team. And obviously, I don't even need to say about the Forest connections there. So just a few thoughts to throw out there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting times ahead, to put it mildly.
Yeah, we need someone who, I think the fans would buy into Nigel. I don't know if the players would. I feel like we need someone who both would buy into straight away, and someone who can get you out of a relegation battle if we're in one, which I guess we'll know. When will we? Well, will we know, Paul, after the Leeds game? That will be 11 Premier League games, or after the United game? Will we know by then? It's only 2 games from now, I guess.
Yeah, I asked myself this question a few weeks ago, or probably at the beginning of the international break, in terms of, again, thinking about whether you go down the Dyche route or whether we're ready for, dial 999 for 999 for Dyche yet. And I kind of was of the opinion that we're probably not at that stage yet. Sounds like I've obviously turned today. But yeah, when are you in a relegation battle? Probably by November, December, I would think, is when it really starts to take shape. But you don't really want to leave yourself open to be in that situation. We want to try and arrest the slide as soon as possible. Look, people will point to Crystal Palace last season. I think they had a shocking first. I think they won one of their first 12 or 13 games last season. And look what, they ended up winning the FA Cup. I think they finished 12th or 11th, 13th, that sort of neck of the woods. So, that's still feasible. Of course, the one thing they had was stability, and they had Glasgow and they stuck with him and all the rest of it, which obviously we're not in that situation. But yeah, like I said before, I still think the season is eminently salvageable. But we need to get out of where we are pretty quickly in order to, feel that level of comfort that we're not looking over our shoulder for the next 7 or 8 months. We need to move up in the next month or 2, and then hopefully have a bit more of a comfortable last 5 or 6 months of the season.
Lovely. Right. Just before we wrap things up then, if you've enjoyed this, great to have so many people with us, even in pretty miserable circumstances. Do us a favour, hit like, do consider membership or Patreon. Join us on the Discord server. That was busy today, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Quickly go around the room. Just any final thoughts, anything you want to add, Dan, anything we might have missed before we go?
I saw a link to the Palmeiras manager actually yesterday pop up on Twitter. Supposedly we considered him in the summer. Might be one for Nathan Joyce to look at. Abel Ferreira, I think, who has managed in Europe as well before. Just looking quickly on his CV. So whether or not there are other options, it sounds like things are moving in the Mancini direction based on some of the tweets and reports. The games just come so thick and fast. It's like there's no time to think about it ourselves, is there? It's either going to be Mancini by the sounds of it, in charge of Porto, or who else is it? I mean, who else sort of takes charge of that game from the club?
Andy Reid, wouldn't it, or something like that, or Warren Joyce, I guess.
Yeah, so that would be a really strange way to go into a game against Porto, which should be a really sort of historic game for us. I suppose I'd shout out the Oh Miss Rolling In fanzine that have done a one with the European games. I previewed that and did some research on them, and you kind of think, well, we've never faced them in a competitive game, and they've got the same record as us, as having won their 2 Champions League Europa Cup finals. They're the only team like us that have done that, so it should be a really historic game. And then we go into it with a caretaker manager and not knowing what's going on would be sad. But that's the nature of where we are. The games are coming thick and fast, so just hoping that that game could be the spark, couldn't it? They are a tough team. They are a kind of a big name club, so hopefully a result against them could give us that breathing space to go into some of these difficult league games and get to that next international break, just at least having some hope of being a settled season, like Paul said.
We'll have a Porto opposition preview on Thursday, the morning of the game, and we'll obviously preview that game and do lots more chat later in the week. Paul, any quick final words before I go to Adam?
Just going to say, obviously, reflecting on Ange, I think Dan Story saw a tweet he put out fairly soon after the announcement, which I think was probably the best one I've seen in terms of summing up the situation. He called it the end of an era, as opposed to the end of an era, which I think is a very succinct way of describing what we've just witnessed in the last 6 or 7 weeks or so. But no final thoughts. Like I said, I'm looking forward to coming up on Thursday to Porto. I'm still up for that. I'm still excited about coming to that game. So hopefully we've got somebody in the dugout who is not a caretaker manager by then, and somebody that we can all rally around, and the City Ground hopefully will be rocking with the sort of anticipation and prospect of a new era to come.
Yeah, I don't know what qualifies as an era, but it's not 8 games where you don't win any of them anyway. Adam, any final thoughts from you?
Just picking up really on what Paul said there, because before he said it, it'd come into my head. I was thinking for all the difficult years that Forest fans have had and how excited you all were at the start of this season with the European thing. I think that really needs tapping into, particularly where you are right now. And Thursday's an opportunity for me, for the club and for the supporters, regardless of who's in the dugout. I'd really love to watch that game and hear the City Ground as raucous as I know it can be, having been there and covered games there, because I just think that would send a message as well for the supporters. I know that's easy to say when it's not your team who's struggling and things are bad right now, but I just feel like Thursday could be big for the football club. I really do. I feel that if they can get a victory in that game against what is a good side with a lot of experienced players from a European perspective in their team, I really think it could give the whole club a lift, and it could really energize the season. Because it's special as well. It's really, really special to have a European game at the City Ground against a club of the size and the history of Porto. And really, I think that's something that in the circumstances the club finds itself in and the team find themselves in right now, that's it. That for me is an opportunity. It's a chance to really put down a marker, show what you're all about, for the players to show on a big stage how good they are, because they are. These are all the things that I think any manager worth their salt would be saying in the dressing room to them before the game as well. So I'm excited for you guys for that game on Thursday. I think it could be something really big for the season. The season you need to like that blue touch paper, and that for me looks like a fixture where you could do that.
Yeah, and we do, just to wrap things up, I mean, we do fundamentally have good players. I mean, Milenkovic and Murillo, Douglas Luiz was really good today. I know people booed when he came off, but he was always going to come off because he's struggled with injury. I thought the midfield was good. We've got a lot of problems as well. I mean, we don't have a left back. Zinchenko's a real problem, and we'll get into all that on Monday. But there's the makings of a team there, so hopefully exciting times to come. And the other thing I was going to say is I thought Taiwo did all right today. I don't know where Taiwo goes from here. That was a real mad left field selection, but I just wanted to say quickly that I thought, he did himself no disgrace at all. Right, thanks everyone's company. Back Monday, 10 a.m. Temps, Pete and James Perch making his podcast debut. Tuesday, Mikey and possibly Lewis. Wednesday, Matt Ford, hopefully. Thursday, post-match show and opposition preview. Sam Collins is on the post-match show, who was really good. And then Friday, Kelv is on, and we'll look ahead to Bournemouth and whatever happens against Portsmouth, might be in a couple of years. Let's hope not. Or even next season. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks to Adam. Thanks to Paul. Thanks to Dan. Thanks for your company. And if we don't see you Monday, we shall see you soon.